Greetings, I am Gresham Zadam, and welcome back to Gresham Reads Monster Blood Tattoo, Book 1, Foundling, by D.M. Cornish. So today, we are doing the final chapter of this rather intriguing book. So, let us prepare, shall we? And feel free to leave your opinions and thoughts on this story at the end. Well, I say at the end, but on your thoughts and opinions on the story in the comments down below. I'm genuinely curious if this is a series you would like to see brought back, or if this is just something that you considered annoying. Feel free to let me know down below. In the meantime, in the previous chapter, Rossamünd had, with the assistance of 4 Acres and Europe, after they had rescued him from Poundage, managed to free Freckles, as well as earn, at the very least somewhat begrudgingly, the respect of Europe herself. And they began to make their way back in order to bring Rossamünd to his destination, where he began the process of parting ways with Europe and 4 Acres in order to travel to become a lamplighter. I'm certainly curious what will happen from then on. But I suppose we'll have to wait till the next book in order to find out, shall we? But either way, let us begin. And as per usual, it begins with the definition. Its definition is lamplighter, noun. Essentially, a kind of specialized soldier, mostly employed by the Empire, though some states also have them. The main task of the lamplighter is to go out in the late afternoon and evening to light the bright-limned lamps that line the conduits or highways of the Empire, and to douse them again in the early morning. They are fairly well paid as soldiers go, earning about 22 sous a year. Now, without comparison for what that would be in real terms, or real life monetization, I am unsure of how well off that is. But it says they are reasonably well paid, so I suppose it must be middle class payment, at the very least. But either way, I suppose it is time to press on. So, let us begin and end with chapter 16, with the Lamplighters. And after a night spent in as comfortable and as peaceful a sleep as money can buy, Rossamünd set out early by coach. The morning was of the clear, bitterly cold kind characteristics of the final month of autumn. Farewells with Europe had been strange. She had insisted on seeing him all the way into the coach, and safely started on this final stretch of the journey. He would be traveling alone, trusted with carrying dispatches for the lamplighter marshal and his staff in Winstermill. He had wrapped the bundle of documents and papers in letters in wax paper and hidden the parcel at the bottom of his valise. Now he sat at the clumsy bulk of the coach, another first on his journey of firsts, leaning out the window to bid Europe goodbye. She had been more impatient than usual, even downright rude. That is, if she said anything at all. Rossamünd was wondering why she'd even bothered. As it came to the moment for him to leave, she suddenly grasped his hand in hers, placing into them a small purse. Without a word, she looked him deeply into his eyes, holding him like this for what seemed the longest time. He did not know what to say to her. He would help her if ever she needed it, but he had no idea how he felt about her. Yet Rossamünd wanted to say something. He had shared the most terrifying times in his life with this mercurial Fulgar. Surely that rated some comment, some word of understanding between them. Yet before he could utter anything, there was a loud crack of the driver's whip, and the coach lurched forward, tearing his hands free from Europe's firm grasp. His heart stung with a nameless regret, and he poked his head quickly out the window. "Goodbye, Miss Europe," he called, his voice seemingly small and silly. "Get well again." They stared at each other across the ever-growing gap. Europe's hands were pressed together before her mouth, but she did not stir. Rossamünd waved again, even more vigorously. "Goodbye!" he cried. Still, the Fulgar continued to stare after him. Too soon, he lost her in the crowd of intervening traffic. He caught a final glimpse of her, and then she was gone. Despite his confusion, despite her brutal way of life, he felt a great weight of sadness at the parting. With a heavy heart, he sat down again and looked inside the purse she had given him. A vague determination somewhere within him vowed never to part with this gift. There were coins within, gold coins, and a fold of paper. He gave a furtive look at the other passengers. In the coach with him was a thin lady in rich satins, bundled up against the cold in a dark violet cloak. Sitting her opposite and to Rossamünd's right was an equally thin man. Was an equally thin man in simple black proofing, who made a study of completely ignoring the other two passengers. Neither of them paid him any mind, and so he counted the coins. 10 sous. Uncreasing the paper, he saw that it was folding money, written up to the value of a further 5 sous. Here, he held the money in his hand, held more money in his hands than he had ever seen before. It made him feel very strange. And there was another leaf of paper, a note, wrapped up with the folding money. It was written in a delicately elegant hand, the mark of a highly ranked lady, and it read, "For Rossamünd, to buy yourself a new hat with, a fair portion of the reward for our adventure. You have been a revelation. With more affection than I am used to, Europa, Duchess-in-Waiting of Names." Rossamünd's eyes went wide. Europe, or Europa, as he had just discovered, was a Duchess-in-Waiting. He had been spending his time with a peer, highly ranked noble, and one in line to rule a whole city-state. He had rescued and been rescued by one who was apparently so far above him in rank, she should never have to even think on him. It was little wonder she was so confident, so self-possessed. Europe had become an even profounder mystery. Feeling faintly uneasy about being given money earned in the slaughter of an undeserving creature, Rossamünd buried the gift purse down at the bottom of his satchel. North out of High Vesting went the coach, only a day after he had arrived, and back up the gangway, whipping past the vegetable sellers. Rossamünd was on the wrong side of the vehicle to be able to wave at them. They traveled faster than the landaulette had on the contrary journey, and arrived at the Harefoot Dig by midday. Here, the horses were changed, and his two traveling companions went into the warehouse to buy their lunch. Rossamünd remained within the transport and dined on some of the supplies Europe had provided. These included withered ox kidney on expensive dark brown crust, and a sachet of small crescent-shaped nuts that the Fulgur had called cashew stalks, with a taste wonderfully salty and exotically sweet. Ah yes, cashews. A very tasty snack. I know Darkus is obsessed with them. Whenever he gets the chance, he contemplates buying them.
Hey, can't blame me, they're good. Just like almonds. Only almonds taste different, but different kind of good, you know?
Oh, most certainly. Almonds are certainly a favorite of my own as well. Either way, soon enough, the journey was resumed. They soon made it to Silvernook, passing through with only a pause to pick up mail. Then on they went, and entered country Rossamünd had not yet seen. The woodland of the Brindleshaws extended much further north, then stopped quite abruptly as the hills dropped away sharply to an expanse of cultivated flatlands. They looked familiar to the Foundling, and from what he could gather from the map in the almanac, he guessed this area to be just another part of Sulk. Twice more the coach stopped, once by a great hedge, behind which Rossamünd could spy a grand manor house, to let off the silent woman, and a second time in the middle of what appeared to be a great expanse of swampy fields and nothing more. Here, the sullen man disembarked, saying "Good afternoon," as he did, catching the Foundling so unawares he was not able to respond in time. With both traveling companions gone, Rossamünd had the rare privilege of traveling in a hired coach on his own. He kicked off his shoes and lounged about on either seat, staring at great length at the passing scenes on either side. They went through several small settlements, each one guarded, fenced, and gated. As the coach continued on, the cold, clear day became overcast in a thin sort of way, making the afternoon sun a dull off yellow and turning the veil-like clouds gunmetal gray. The land was becoming wilder here, less well-tended and fertile. There was something eerie about its arid breath. Thrud brooded here, and while the day's orb was setting, it was a great relief to see the final destination come into view. There, still a few miles distant around a long bend, window lights twinkling, sat Winstermill Manse. The name of Winstermill was, so Rossamünd's almanac read, a corruption of a more ancient title. Winstreslow, I believe. Given to a ruined fortress upon the high foundations of which the manse now stood. It was built right by a long line of low yet steep-sided hills, and at the beginning of a great gorge which cut through this same range. The manse looked like a country house, yet so much larger, squatter, mightier, and much more solid. It had a great many more roofs of heavy lead shingles rising higher and higher as they receded from the front of the structure like a complex range of ever taller hillocks. From the midst of these lofty chimneys, even taller than those of the Harefoot Dig, pointed heavenward in baffling profusion like blunt spines. There were several round, crenellated strong points projecting out from the roof's myriad slopes, and the barrels of great guns showing from some of them. The manse's outer walls were angled inward to help deflect the blow of a cannon shot, its lower windows narrow slits barely wide enough to admit light. The great gate, was made of thick, weather-greened bronze. Lamps blazed above this threatening portal, an enormous flag, the Spandarian of the Empire. A golden owl over a field of red and white, barely showing in the dark, curled and whipped about above it all. This was a place made to stand against all threats, and Rossamünd admired its grim defenses. Most significantly of all, for one about to become a lamplighter, was the long line of brightly flaring lanterns that marched away from Winstermill, threading eastward like a great glittering necklace, disappearing into the distant dark of the gorge. Excuse me. It was such as these, raised high on tall posts of black iron, that he was surely expected to tend. The coach turned off the main way, which disappeared into a tunnel made through the very foundation of the manse, and rattled up a steep drive to Winstermill's bronze gates. These were already opening, and the coach was admitted without having to halt. Within the curtain of the manse's outer fortifications, Rossamünd had expected to find a bustle of diligent folk marching about on serious business. Instead, it was empty of any bustle or even hustle, and no serious business seemed to be going on anywhere nearby. A single yardsman came up to them, touching his hat as greeting. "Winstermill," the coachman cried. "Change vehicles if you wish to travel further." Rossamünd alighted and looked about the well-lit yard. It was wide and flat and bare, but for one stunted, leafless tree growing by a farther wall. His valise was quickly retrieved for him, and coach clattered away, together with the yardsman retreating somewhere beyond the side of the structure. Rossamünd presumed the horses would be stabled and the drivers rested for the return leg of the following day. The boy was left all alone now, and stood before these august headquarters, uncertain of what to do next. As he waited, he wrestled out the bundle of dispatches, ready to hand them to whoever should ask for them. Still, no one sallied forth to greet him. In the end, if only to avoid the bitter cold, he walked to the most important-looking set of doors, and, finding them unbarred, pushed his way within. Inside was a large blank room, square and empty. There was another door at the farther end, and Rossamünd walked over to this and went through. Now he found himself at one end of a long, wide hall, with walls painted green like a lime in season, and a single narrow rug patterned in carnelian, if I could English properly, patterned in carnelian and black, running the whole length of the stone floor. A person in uniform stood about halfway down. Rossamünd strode along this lime hallway and offered up the dispatches promptly to this uniformed person, a tough-looking fellow with an oddly cut hair. As he did, Rossamünd addressed the man as he had been trained to do for serving upon a ram. "Rossamünd Bookchild, sir, recently arrived and ready to serve aboard, to serve you here." The rough-looking fellow looked at him, then at the wad of paper the Foundling held, without curiosity. "Not for me, son. Hand it to one of the pushers of pencils inside there," he said with gruff authority, pointing to a pair of flimsy-looking, finely carved doors at the end of the lime hall. "Oh," Rossamünd said. His initial flush of courage now spent, the Foundling entered these ornated... I apparently cannot read today. Entered these ornamented doors nervously. Beyond was an enormous square space with a ceiling high above. and the clatter of the opening door rang and echoed within. Along the distant farther wall was a massive wooden structure of drawers, cabinets, and rolling stepladders. What he would learn later was the immense and complex document catalog, in which all the correspondence and paperwork of the Lamplighters eventually found its final burial place. To the Foundling's left and to his right, facing out from either wall, were two dark wood desks. A studious-looking man worked behind each, the one on the left looking up at him briefly as he entered, and the one on the right keeping his head down and his hands scribbling. Between the two desks was a great blank area of cold slate, and Rossamünd, with each footstep clip-clopping too loudly, moved to stand right in the middle of this barren space. He looked to his right, then to his left. Both clerks continued their close attention to their work and offered nothing to the new arrival. With no idea of which way to go, Rossamünd repeated a little rhyme in his head to solve this puzzle, thinking either left or right with each subsequent word. The rhyme itself was a short list of faraway, semi-mythical, and notoriously thuggish places, and it always fired Rossamünd's imagination. Eker, leaker, loker, feel, my decision now revealed. He finished on his right. I see, so it is this world's equivalent of the eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Got it. Which, if you actually pay attention to it, if you're deciding between two things and you do eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you will always select the second object. The one you don't start with. It's something a lot of people, I'm sure, have noticed, but some have not. Finished on his right. Right it is. He went clip-clop, and stood before that desk. Holding out the letters, he repeated himself. Rossamünd Bookchild, sir. Recently arrived and ready to serve as a lamplighter. The clerk looked up with a scowl upon his sharp, bespectacled face. He continued to write, even though his attention was no longer on the task. Not me, child. Him. He snarled. He put his nose back to his scribbling. He could only have meant the other clerk, way across the opposite side. Right it isn't, then. Rossamünd held back a sigh. He turned on his heels and clip-clopped to the left-hand desk and its equally diligent clerk. He spoke his introduction for a third time, and the clerk stopped writing, put down his pencil, and stood. Welcome, Rossamünd Bookchild. My name is Inkwell. I am the registry clerk. You have been expected. He took the dispatch bundle from the Foundling, and they shook hands. It's a good thing you have arrived now. After today, we were going to give up on you. If you had got here tomorrow, we would have turned you away, I'm afraid. In the nick of time, as they say. As Inkwell, the registry clerk, sorted through the dispatches, he held up a tightly folded oblong of fine linen paper. This is yours, I reckon, he said, waving the article at Rossamünd. Puzzled, Rossamünd took it slowly. It was a letter made out to him in the script of someone he knew well and loved dearly. Verlaine. He had been carrying it the whole length of his travel to High Vesting, and could have read and reread it at his leisure aboard the coach. He was desperate to open it, but had to wait. Inkwell put the dispatches down and sat again. He organized a wad of papers, took up his pencil, and began to quiz Rossamünd with all manner of questions. Age, eye color, height, weight, origin, race. On and on they went. Often they were incomprehensible. Political affinities, species bias. Whichever answer Rossamünd gave, no matter how incoherent, was filled in on the relevant forms. When each form was completed, Inkwell rewrote it twice more. Having completed this task, he then looked over the Foundling's newly redrafted documents and papers and read the covering letter with fixed attention. Rosamund's eyes nearly bugged from their sockets as he waited, breath held, to see how these temporary certificates would be received. Excuse me. I see, Inkwell said at last. With a scroll won't like these. Neither will the marshal. 'Tis no matter. These are perfectly legal. He gave a slight smile as his attention shifted to the boy before him. Been through some interesting times getting here, have we? Rosamund nodded emphatically. Good lord, what is with me today? Aye, sir, an adventure of them. Inkwell's smile broadened. You'll have to tell me sometime. With that, he took out yet more documents and began copying pertinent details from Rosamund's papers. When the registry clerk was done, and all the forms properly blotted and indexed, he politely told Rosamund that he was now to make his way over to the other clerk. He is our indexer, and he is called with a scroll. He will enter you into our manning list, so that from now on you will be called on the roll and be reckoned a lamplighter. Inkwell stood and shook Rosamund's hand once more. Welcome to the Emperor's service. Thank you, Mr. Inkwell. Rosamund returned, somewhat bewildered. I will try and do my very best, just as I was taught to, sir. Good for you. Now take this receipt and his excuse card with the scroll. I will see you tomorrow. With that, Inkwell went on with whatever it was he went on with, and ceased paying attention to the Foundling. Clutching a wallet of new papers and certificates, Rosamund stepped cautiously across the gap back to the sharp-faced, sharp-mannered clerk Witherscroll. Mr. Witherscroll, he began. With a sour look, the clerk snatched the receipt and excuse card from Rosamund's hand. The boy tried. Shut it. I know my business. The indexer looked down at the excuse card with sinister deliberation, and a cruel turn to his mouth. A hoarse growl wheezed in his throat. Little Weevil couldn't do a simple thing like keep his most important papers safe. His beady eyes shot Rosamund an evil glare. Makes me wonder why we are to even bother to take him in. Sit down. With a start, and as there was no chairs about, Rosamund obediently sat on the cold stone floor. Taking a pencil in both hands, Witherscroll proceeded to write furiously into several books and ledgers, and onto several lists. When each entry was done, he would thump it violently with a wooden handle attached to a large flat sponge. A stamp? That wasn't in the book, that was me questioning if it was. Rosamund winced at every blow. Witherscroll eventually leaned over his desk and looked down upon the Foundling, his eyes squinting meanly behind his spectacles. You have certainly taken your time to get here, he spat. Gave Germanicus an awful messing around, you did. Too good for us, are you, to make your way promptly? He poked a finger at Rosamund's face. A lamplighter's life is punctuality, boy. You would better get your habits about this, or your time with us will be brief, troubled, and brief. Those were familiar words. Aye, Mr. Witherscroll. The clerk leaned across the desk and sneered. Do not address me, boy, as anything other than sir. Have you got that? You don't need to know my name. You certainly have not earned the privilege to use it. Rosamund felt his neck contract like a turtle's. Sir. Finally, and with half-uttered protestations about the inconvenience, Witherscroll led Rosamund through a small side door and down the narrowest corridors to a small drab cell with flaking walls. On the next page, there is a portrait of Witherscroll, leaning over a book and writing, but by the looks of it, certainly seems an aggressive fellow. This room, furnished with only a metal stretcher, not unlike the one he had slept on for most of his time at the Foundling, was to be his bunk for the night. Tomorrow, Witherscroll informed him, you'll be woken at 5 in the morning, if you are not already up by then, and you must move immediately to the parade yard for the calling of the roll. Then you'll meet the Lamplighter Marshal, or officer commanding. Then you'll receive your routine and begin your instructions. Do you understand? Aye, sir. Rossamünd was beginning to feel, all over again, the familiar doubts about the desirability of this occupation. Without a bath, or even a wash to clean off the grime of travel, he was told that he was to have his bright linen extinguished in no more than 15 minutes. Extracting another "Aye, sir" from the new arrival, Witherscroll left Rossamünd to prepare for sleep. The only thing on the Foundling's mind, though, was a letter he held in his hand. The precious letter with dearest Verline's unmistakable writing upon it. The letter addressed to him personally. It was like a sweet song to his tired soul, an encouragement from those afar. He was still thought of. He was remembered. He sat down on the cot, causing it to creak loudly even under his slight weight. Hands shaking a little with excitement, he pried open the seal and many securing folds to reveal the message within. The date, 23rd day of Lyrium, was scrawled at the top. It had been written 5 days ago, the day Rossamünd had been discovered hiding in that box thrown by Europe. Eagerly, he read on. My dear and most missed Rossamünd, how I wish I could see you. How I wish I could right now see you here in front of me. I would hold you till you squirmed out of my grasp and stood there looking at me bashfully, like you used to do. As this cannot be, a simple correspondence is all I have. I thank Madame Oprah for teaching me my letters. Yet I hug you even now in my heart, and pray constantly, too, that you might be safe and thriving. It's silly of me, I know, but I miss you. See, my tears have smeared the ink. One day, find your way back to me, even just for a visit, so I might see you grown and well, and be filled with pride at what a fine man you are undoubtedly becoming. We could take a rest cure to my sister, so I might show you off to her as well. I have to tell you, too, that dear Master Friendstar is determined to come to you at Winstermill, or wherever you will be stationed at on the Wormway. Though he does not show it, nor say what the cause is, I can tell that he is greatly distressed. All he will say is that there is something he should have told you long ago, though he will not speak what that is. He says he must tell you only, in your company alone, and does not want to risk such things in letters. Oh, Rossamünd, what can it be? Do you know? Regardless, what he has to say is not so much of my worry, but rather that he is getting old, as vinegaroons go, and his pith is beginning to fail him. I don't want to worry you, Rossamünd, heart of my heart, but I think you need to know, so that you might be ready to care and comfort him, who has done as much for you for so long. When he finally arrives to you, I am frightened that this journey will be his last, my heart, so look out for him. He says he intends to leave for Winstermill as soon as winter has passed its worst, and the season is fit for travel once more, for one of his poor health. He listened to my pleas in this, at least. Expect him within the last week of Hearse, or the first week of Oreo. At the latest. And that is Oreo spelled O-R-I-O. Not like the cookie. Look out for him then, won't you? I must end, for Madame is demanding her bath. But reply to this the instant you get it, for we ache to know that you are well. Master Franstart sends you his blessings, or he would if he knew I was writing to you. If he didn't know, I'm sure he would tell you to stay at your task. Oh, excuse me. Till he comes, no matter how anxious I might get. I send you my love-filled blessings too, and over again. Most assuredly, your Verline. P.S. By the way, though this is not so important, you will not be surprised, I am sure, to learn that the day before yesterday, Gosling ran away from us and cannot be found. I am ashamed to be so uncharitable, but the mood here has lightened considerably. Write me as soon as you can, please. Also, Master Crampolling wishes to know if you have had any use for his potives. While Rossamünd read the letter, he was first moved with joy, but then to increasing alarm. Had Master Franstart, ill as he was, finally repented of letting him go, and now planned to fetch him back to the oppression of the Foundlingery? Was this the big secret? It's the first week of Pulchris now. He counted the months on his knuckles. Pulchris, Brumus, Pulvis, Hemo, Hers, Oreo. That means he'll be here in 4, maybe 5 months. As to the news about Gosling, well, Verline was right. Rossamünd was not surprised. Indeed, he was glad for Verline and the Master's sakes, and for the littlest children too, that his old foe had run off. Then came a heavy hammering at the door of his cell. A discouragingly serious voice bellowed, "Douse lanterns!" Rossamünd scrambled to unfold the blankets and pillows supplied, and wrestled them over the unsavory-looking mattress. His bright limbs still glowing, the hammering soon came again. "You don't want to start your career with us like this, son. Get your lantern out and get to bed." The voice held promise of all manner of things terrible, unguessable. Quickly turning the bright lamp over so that its light would dim and gradually expire, Rossamünd completed making his bed in the faint twilight of its dying glow, undressing in pitch blackness. Finally, as he lay restlessly shifting, with many creakings and groans of the metal frame, against all the uncomfortable lumps of the mattress, his fading thoughts swam. They dealt for a moment on Verline and her worries, but it was Master Franstart, his failing health, and his intended visit that troubled him most. Rossamünd did not know how to feel about his old dormitory master now. He wished the old vinegaroon would just stay in Buschenberg and leave him to his new path. With a flash of guilt, it occurred to Rossamünd that Franstart might not survive the journey, though he was already regretting the intended visit. He would hate any harm to come to his old dormitory master even more. In the orbit of his sleeping musings, he wondered too if Europe, the Duchess Lazar, would indeed return as she had said, and ask him once more to be her factotum. Worry for poor Freckles stirred him for a moment, and this became concern for where Fouracres might be that night. So spun his tired thoughts. As sleep overtook him, he marveled that, through the many twists of what should have been a straightforward journey, he had managed to mumble, still intact, still healthy, to his destination. At last, for better or worse. He was where he was originally destined, to finally become a lamplighter. tomorrow he would wake to the beginning of a whole new life. Finis Unilibris. End Book 1. And that concludes Book 1 of Monster Blood Tattoo. I most certainly will need to get the second book, or Darkest will.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll get it.
Do you enjoy your nap over there?
Yeah, it was nice.
It wasn't too long, I hope.
Nah, it was fun.
But either way, if you enjoyed this series and this story, feel free to leave a like and a comment down below with your preferred, well, your thoughts and opinions, as well as potential future stories you would like me to read. Also, make sure to share the video around and the series itself so that others may get the chance to listen in on this story. Also, I am sorry about any potential... Actually, no, I know there were inconsistencies in the voices, but I am sorry for that. Honestly, I have no excuse, it's just... sometimes I forget. Yep, sometimes we do forget. It's a thing that happens. Indeed, but either way, I will see you all in the next series. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell to be alerted whenever that begins, and I will see you next time. Now I am Gresham's at all, and I do hope you have a pleasant day.